Going. Anyway, he's all over the place. A prolific writer. You can check out his bio and find out more about what he does from the pandemic to nuclear weapons to border issues. He gave a talk on that the other day. Anyway, I think he's just a special friend of USC, and I'm hoping that we can actually have a bet on it's already qualitative, but I'm hoping that quantitatively we can have an even stronger connection in the future. Anyway, Ibrahim, thank you so much for
Yes.
hanging out with us and educating us.
All right. Well, thank you, and good to be here. So I want to do an exercise. I'm wearing our class today. Number one, remind me to tell you about the shirt I'm wearing. Why am I wearing a shirt with Japanese cranes? And number two, why did I bring the pocket watch? I want to do an exercise that deals with security and time. And it's going to be the following. I write for a publication called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. So basically a magazine that Oppenheimer established. I want to count off in a few seconds. I want you just to count. And don't worry, I'll keep track of 89 seconds. And let's begin now. 89. Okay, why 89 seconds? Well, it's a two-point purpose. Not only has it been 80 years since Hiroshima, but the other reason has to do with the subject I'm going to be talking about. For your class, more about the confluence of the atomic and AI age. 89 seconds is the number that has been issued by the atomic scientists in terms of how close we are to doomsday. Okay. For most of the Cold War, it was at 17 minutes to midnight. So what has happened, and I want you to think 17 minutes, even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, if you ask your parents or grandparents how they really thought the world would come to an end, why has it moved to 89 seconds? Well, that's the subject we're going to look at. In other words, a doomsday clock that was invented more or less 80 years ago to make the threat of nuclear annihilation tangible to an American audience. How does it go from 17 minutes to not 90 seconds? In 2005, they pushed it a second closer. So I'm going to be focusing more on kind of hard security issues. Yeah, screw peace education. No, excuse me, that's for the guys next door. No, excuse me, no. Peace education, if you want to look at the more peace education side, feel free to zoom in to Costa Rica. I wish we could do a field trip there. But that's going to be, I'm going to get on a flight tomorrow night. Thursday morning, I arrive in Costa Rica, and then I'll be on the air at noon, which is, I think, 11 o'clock here. That sounds right. Or the other way around. I'm really bad. I usually have ChatGPT do this. Which says, okay, it says a lot about, anyway, if you zoom in, you register, it gets programmed in your calendar, and that's how I normally do it. But it's surreal because on Tuesday, the 16th, I was helping plant a tree that survived Hiroshima. And if you want to know the ginkgo tree, there's one being planted in Costa Rica. There's another one that's planted in the San Diego Botanical Garden in Encinitas. These are the survivors of Hiroshima. So I'm going back and forth. Let's skip this. And let's go to the first video. So to introduce this subject, I want to go back in time. It's the year 2003. I realize some of you aren't even born. I'm working in a place called Monterey, California. It also happens to be in my hometown for a center on non-proliferation studies. What is non-proliferation? Well, the best thing to show you is, have you watched this video? To teach you what is non-proliferation, I should teach you its opposite, the armed version called counter-proliferation. We all experience counter-proliferation over 12 days. Over the summer, what was called the 12-Day War, was an example of counter-proliferation, and my argument is it rarely works. Okay, only non-proliferation can stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. There are exceptions. Don't quote me on that. Syria, 2007. That was one of the few cases where counter-proliferation worked, but rarely does it. Anyway, to understand this, let's go to this exercise. While I was at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, and by the way, do you know it's closing down?
No.
You know? Oh, talking about the CDC getting gutted. This morning we talked about the dangers of gutting the CDC. They lost their money. They're moving to Vermont. Middlebury is closing shop, moving everything to Vermont. Monterey is going to be empty real estate.
And it has to do with federal cuts to their
Yeah,
funding.
they're not going to admit that, but of course that's where all their money comes from.
Jeff Lewis, where will he go?
Jeff Lewis is going to Philadelphia.
Okay.
I'm recording this. He's going to the Foreign Policy Research Institute. So they're losing Jeff. William Potter is moving to Vermont, apparently. Anyway, but in the good old days when they were paying my paycheck, oh, not you, sorry.
The government's carefully coordinated.
This is what we want. And let me just go. You can hear the volume, right? Okay, very good. Let's watch them. Oh, savvy God, how many times have you seen this video? You're probably Kevin, but it was a different world when I showed it to you. This is pre-12-Day War. Let's watch the following.
Propaganda offensive took an embarrassing hit tonight after Downing Street was accused of plagiarism. The target is an intelligence dossier released on Monday and heralded by none other than US Secretary of State Colin Powell at the United Nations yesterday. Channel 4 News has learned that the bulk of this 19-page document was copied from 3 different articles, one written by a graduate student. Our defense specialist, Julian Rush, has the details.
I will try to.
On Monday, the day before the US Secretary of State Colin Powell addressed the UN, Downing Street published its latest paper on Iraq. It gives the impression of being an up-to-the-minute, intelligence-based analysis. Mr. Powell was fulsome in his praise.
Being hidden. I would call my colleagues' attention to the fine paper that the United Kingdom distributed yesterday, which describes in exquisite detail Iraqi deception activities.
Published on the Number 10 website and called Iraq, its infrastructure of concealment, deception and intimidation, it outlines the structure of Saddam's intelligence organizations. But it made familiar reading to a Cambridge academic.
Many of the words and phrases that it used I recalled from another context. So I searched around the other articles that I'd read on Iraq's organizations, its military and security organizations, and realized that large sections of the British government's dossier were actually copied.
Copied from here, an article last September in a small journal, the Middle East Review of International Affairs. Its author, Ibrahim Al-Marashi, a postgraduate student from Monterey in California.
The British government dossier is 19 pages long. Most of pages 6 to 16 are copied directly from that document.
Word for word.
Word for word. Even the grammatical errors and the typographical mistakes are copied.
Large sections do indeed appear verbatim. This, for example, 6 paragraphs long on Saddam's special security organization. The exact same words are in the Californian student's paper. Of military intelligence, Al-Marashi writes, the head of military intelligence generally did not have to be a relative of Saddam's immediate family nor a Tikriti. Saddam appointed Sabir Abdulaziz al-Duri as head. Note the comma after appointed. Downing Street paraphrases the first sentence, but the second is cut and pasted, complete with the same grammatical error. Academics take plagiarism seriously. It's intellectual theft. Downing Street didn't ask for permission to reproduce the work, which is not current, but actually an historical analysis of the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait before the last Gulf War.
He's writing his PhD thesis on the operation of Iraqi forces inside Kuwait, and his primary source of information is documents captured from the Iraqi government in 1991. The information, therefore, that he is using is 12 years old, and he acknowledges this in his article. The British government, when it transplants that information into its own dossier, does not make that acknowledgement. So it is presented as current information about Iraq's current security services, when really the information that it is using are some 12 years old.
Downing Street copied from two other articles from the magazine Jane's Intelligence Review. Its editor is happy to be quoted, less happy at the selective way some parts were edited.
What you need to look at is exactly how it's been compiled and collated. And the questions that you're asking about, has certain things been selected for spin, are right questions to be asked.
In several places, Downing Street edits the originals to make more sinister reading. Number 10 says the main intelligence agency is spying on foreign embassies in Iraq. The original read monitoring foreign embassies in Iraq. And the provocative role of supporting terrorist organizations in hostile regimes is weaker in the originals, aiding opposition groups in hostile regimes.
Part of the article.
And an original phrase describing a group made up of bullies and country bumpkins is in number 10's version, just bullies. Editing to make Saddam's apparatus look more terrifying, raising questions about the way number 10 is spinning the justification for war.
Julian Rush, well, I called Downing Street for reaction. No minister was available, and intriguingly, actually, the Tory opposition didn't want to talk about it either. Downing Street offered this statement. Our report was put together by a range of government officials. The report makes this clear. The contents were drawn from a number of sources, including intelligence material. First paragraph only, I gather. The report does not identify or credit any sources, nor does it claim exclusivity on its contents. We consider the text as published accurate. The Downing Street spokesman would not be drawn on whether this included the typos and spelling mistakes.
Okay, so enough embarrassment there.
Saudi's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wanted
no.
3 things: U.S. security guarantees, F-35.
Okay, now let's go back. Why is this video important? And I want you to keep in mind, what is he holding in his hand is a simulacrum of a vial of anthrax. Okay, so let's review. The important thing about the document you saw in front of your TV was a reference to a couple of letters called Unmovik and Unskam. So let me explain, what am I doing at CNS? First of all, it's unfortunate the British government didn't have Grammarly back then or ChatGPT to write the report for them. That way they could have plagiarized me legally. Anyway, but no, they didn't have Grammarly. They couldn't catch the grammar mistake. What was I working on? You see, my thesis was about the 1990 Gulf War. And this is about my subject having having a parallel life, getting resurrected for the Iraq War round 2. You see, in 1991, when the US attacked Iraq, it wasn't a bilateral conflict. Okay, so one of my students here had a crash course in IR theory. It wasn't a conflict that could be explained by realism. Okay, when the US engaged in military violence or political violence against Iraq, it was doing it under the cover of a UN Security Council resolution. In other words, the US in 1991 was following through the multilateral, what's called a liberal institutional approach. The UN gave the ultimatum to Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. Iraq refused. Thus, there was, under international law, you could say almost, cover for the US to use military means to expel Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Now, there was also a parallel war. And you see, under the UN cover, there was another mandate. It wasn't just about restoring sovereignty from Kuwait to Iraq. It wasn't about restoring Kuwait's sovereignty. The other mandate given by the UN was to destroy Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. So in other words, the UN Security Council resolution is an example of non-proliferation, right? You are punishing a nation, okay? But the means to eliminate Iraq's nuclear program is counter-proliferation. Now, for Iraq's nuclear program, how did this become a threat? Well, it goes back to an episode in 1981. You see, Israel had pursued counterproliferation by bombing a nuclear reactor outside of Baghdad with a fleet of F-15s and F-16. They bombed it from the air, and for the sake of destroying Iraq's nuclear aspirations. What Israel failed to learn, and it's quite amazing, is you could bomb a facility, you cannot bomb knowledge into oblivion. And in fact, when you bomb a country's nuclear program, it usually is counterproductive in this sense. Iraq's nuclear scientists that were wary of working with Saddam Hussein on creating a bomb. Now we're doing this, more than willing to sign up, not in the name of Saddam's glory, but in the name of an Iraqi nuclear nationalism. You see, it was to spite Israel. Okay, I want you to think of that lesson from 1981 and project it into the last 12 days over the summer. Okay, just replace Iraq with Iran. It's very easy. It's just one letter difference, but the similarities are the same. Okay. Israel might have hoped to, through counterproliferation, of bombing Iran's nuclear program. But this is the thing, you can't bomb nuclear science into oblivion. You can't bomb knowledge. The only thing you do is create the motivation for the bomb to spite the bomber. You only increase nuclear nationalism usually when you try to destroy a country's nuclear issue, because it has all to do with this thing called sovereignty and national pride. Anyway, so in fact, in 1981, Iraq learned a lesson. We're going to literally push our nuclear program underground. Okay, and the Iraq's nuclear network was quite advanced. I mean, it took really the US by surprise. So they bombed it. Okay. And then what did they learn? You see, you could bomb a nuclear program from the air. That was Operation Desert Storm. But then what did the US learn? Even bombing Iraq continuously for 6 weeks didn't destroy the nuclear program. What was needed, here's where the non-proliferation comes in, not just counter-proliferation. You needed a UN weapons inspection team called UNSCOM to verify the damage. And UNSCOM said, okay, some damage occurred, some damage didn't occur, but we're going to make sure that any nascent or surviving nuclear infrastructure is nipped in the bud. And this is the thing, UNSCOM's job really worked, they just didn't realize it. They had dismantled Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program, but the US wasn't sure. And this is the fear that put the US on a counter-proliferation mission called the US invasion of Iraq of 2003. Why is Powell back at the UN? He wants to repeat what he did under the first administration. Powell back then was the chief of staff. His boss, George H. Bush, had gotten UN cover. He was trying now as Secretary of State to get the UN cover for a second round of counter-proliferating Iraq's WMD, and it failed. During this presentation, he was supposed to have had intercepted conversation by Iraqi soldiers moving around nuclear equipment. But it didn't help that if the first piece of evidence was fake, the UK intelligence report, people then started to ask, well, what else in that presentation could have been fake? That was back 2003, and we've learned that, well, all of it was fake. There were no weapons of mass destruction found. For the most part, it had been dismantled by 1996 in Iraq. Now, this is something to remind yourself going forward when Iran's nuclear program is scrutinized and intelligence is provided to you, whether it's intelligence provided by Israel or the US or the EU, okay? No intelligence is above reproach. No intelligence is perfect. And it took the lesson of more than 20 years ago, and this is why I showed this video to remind us. Okay, now, I'm gonna go behind here. What am I working on now? It says a lot. This is the latest, and if this gets plagiarized, that's fine. I hope it gets plagiarized because this means the world is going to wake up to a new threat. And the new threat is this. And it doesn't involve Iraq or Iran. It's a global problem. And it says a lot. AI in the nuclear arms race. That it took 4 of us to write this because it's really 4 of us guessing along the lines of a science fiction novel. a really dystopian science fiction novel. What role will AI play in terms of nuclear proliferation? And don't think of Skynet. Okay, Skynet did the Terminator franchise, right? It's not, I mean, it's again, okay, maybe Skynet does have its value. Let me put it this way. In this sense, let's go back to 1983. Actually, the 80s. Let's go back to the 80s, and I'm not talking about the Terminator. I'm talking about this. His last name is Stanislav. He is a Soviet officer in a nuclear asylum. And more or less, he's getting an alert that there's about 5 incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles from the US. And in that case, your immediate reaction is launch the missiles to retaliate. But Stanislav questioned the incoming radar signature because basically what he was thinking is this: if the US was going to attack us, why just 5 ICBMs? Surely they would go all out. So there's something not right here. Why 5 ICBMs? But orders are orders. If the machine is saying they're coming, you have to launch. And basically, what did this man do? He disobeyed orders. He thought of the circumstances, basically said, this doesn't feel right, and disobeyed orders. And basically, Stanislav was the man who saved the world. Sure enough, it was a Soviet satellite misreading beams of sunlight reflecting off a cloud and mistaking them for the signature of an ICBM being launched. For that reason, he didn't launch his missiles. That would have hit the US, and the US would have certainly retaliated. Imagine if Stanislav was replaced with an AI. Imagine if an artificial intelligence in 1983 was making that decision. Would it go according to its gut? Would it question the context? Still, to this very day, the common knowledge is there will always be some kind of human in the loop if AI is going to make a decision. This is the common knowledge in terms of launching a nuclear missile fleet. So that's why I'm saying Skynet has only so much value. No, when I talk about AI in the nuclear arms race, this is what I'm meaning. It's not AI controlling nuclear weapons. It's AI generating ideas of how to produce a bomb in a way humans might not think about. Think of a nascent nuclear power, trying to find ways to overcome some kind of restrictions, and AI can help in the not only production, testing. This is a couple of ways in which AI could help out. And of course, let's not forget, when we think of Iron Dome or America's dream of a golden dome, again, in that case, AI has already worked come together with this field. It is AI intercepting those projectiles that are moving faster than the speed of sound. In other words, guiding the anti-missile defenses. Anyway, that's where the future is. So futuristic, the book hasn't come out. July 2026 is when it's going to come out. But the confluence of AI and nuclear proliferation or non-proliferation, it's already occurred. So before we go into this, I highly recommend this book, but it's already out of date. How Disruptive Military Innovation Determines the Fate of Great Powers. What do we mean by innovation, and what do we mean by disruptive? And for this, we have to go to kind of the private sector to help us brainstorm. Okay, so let's review. The atomic bomb had to be invented. So did the cellular phone. The cell phone had to be invented. That's not innovation. Innovation is this, and I don't know if you've seen in the 1990s, if you see a film, a really bad one called Clueless, you know that film? Do you remember how big, okay, so do you remember how big the phones were in Clueless, the cell phones? The innovation is this, making it small enough and to combine it with your music, your contacts, and navigation, and making it to scale, okay? This is the innovation. Now, keep in mind, even when it came out, now here we are 16 up to 17 generations later, when the iPhone was first invented, remember, Bill Gates was hiding a couple of versions underneath the podium because the scalable innovation hadn't occurred yet. The engineers haven't figured out how to combine the iPod with the navigation features or the context. So really, when he was doing that great presentation, he was showing you a couple of different iPhones. You just didn't realize it. Okay, here we are now at 17 generations later. The iPhone has been combined with AI. Has it been disruptive? Ask the people at BlackBerry or Nokia. How many of you are carrying a BlackBerry or Nokia today? But there was a time in 2003, nobody in the world wouldn't leave their house without their Nokia. Nokia didn't do anything wrong. That's what its CEO said just as a couple of weeks ago when it was being bought out because it had gone bankrupt. Neither product did anything wrong, but this is the way the disruptive innovation works. With the atomic bomb, we're going to see it gets invented 80 years ago. But the great scalable innovation doesn't happen till a bit later. All right. And this is now the great question. What role will AI play in all of this? Okay. So let's go back to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And you see when you write for the Bulletin, what do we write about? Okay. So there's a doomsday clock. And what feeds the doomsday clock? Nuclear risk, climate change, biosecurity. Now look what I like disruptive technology. Take the disruption and add it to nuclear risk or biosecurity, and let's see. So when I write for the Bulletin, what are some risks? Well, on the eve of COVID, right? I knew things were going to get bad because past diseases told us this is a perfect storm in the making. What else? Can NATO become a climate alliance treaty organization that deals with that threat, climate change? What about disruptive technologies? If we were to click this, what would we see? Well, here we are. The disruptive technologies. Still, this was just a few days ago. We still don't know where COVID came from. Is it a biological phenomena? Did it come from a bat reservoir? Is it all of the above? Anyway, what did I highlight? AI can make it easier to produce sarin. So for those of you who don't know what sarin is a biological weapon. Sorry, sarin is a chemical weapon. You know what the difference is? Let me explain what the difference is. You guys are a bit older, you're graduate students, so I could talk about drugs in this class. I couldn't do it with the undergrads. Okay. Ergot is a biological organism that infects wheat. Okay. And if you sniff ergot, you're going to get a hallucinogenic high. It's a natural psychedelic, just like mushrooms. Okay. That's biological. It's something that infects the wheat supply and it gives you a psychedelic high. LSD, lysergic acid, was a chemical synthesis of the same thing that ergot did to your mind, discovered accidentally by a very happy Swiss scientist. So in other words, if you could synthetically produce the active substance that makes you high from ergot, okay, then surely you could do that for most things, such as sarin. You don't need necessarily, what can AI do? It could tell you what are the precursors you can get to make sarin in your basement. Sarin is a deadly nerve agent. Okay, it goes straight for the nervous system. World War I, let's review. Great chemical weapons in World War I. It began with mustard gas, chlorine gas, okay? And then it evolved, those are blister agents that you breathe them into your lungs, it causes you to drown. And then it evolved to nerve agents, sarin and VX, that go straight for your nervous system. Those are all chemical compounds. Biological weapons were, well, it's just crazy when we think about it. What were some biological weapons? Viruses, bacteria. Oops. The Black Death, the Black Plague. That's a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, and both the US and the Soviet Union weaponized it. And you probably don't realize from what. I don't even know if you know what these animals are. Marmots? You know what marmots are? These big furry creatures. Just imagine a glorified rat, just a big fat kind of cute rat. Yeah, carrying one of the deadliest bacterium of all time, Yersinia pestis. The Soviets loved getting the most deadliest form of Black Death, Yersinia pestis from marmots. Yeah. And sure enough, I shouldn't laugh about this. There was a Kazakh couple that had your marmot liver for dinner, and they died from the plague. This was a couple of years ago. Now today I shouldn't laugh, but today we don't have. They deserve it eating that poor animal. I mean, today we don't have to worry about that because bacterium we could solve with antibiotics. Take an antibiotic, the bacteria gets killed. They just couldn't get some in time because they were having marmots in Mongolia in the middle of nowhere, and they died. Anyway, anthrax is another biological agent. Anthrax is a spore. It infects, let's say, cows, reindeer. In the tundra, when climate releases tundra, evaporates it, all these dead deers that might have been frozen for more than a century, all of a sudden are releasing anthrax and killing nomadic herdsmen, for example. Anthrax is one. And then let's not forget the greatest one, smallpox, the deadliest killer of all humanity in human history for the last 10,000 years. That's a virus. You can't take an antibiotic for that. For a virus, you have to get vaccinated. That's the only protection. How many of you have a small discolored? Okay, where were you born?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to ask if we got smallpox.
Yeah, smallpox.
I got it in the Navy.
Yeah, you served in the military.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because the fear was a adversary nation might weaponize it. You were being protected for a biological weapon in this case. You were given this, and so it left a small discoloration.
Yeah,
And can you go in the Navy and say, hey, I'm anti-vax?
no.
No, it's a lot. Yeah, they don't take that. No, you get it and you take it with. So you have it. So hypothetically now, and this is my nightmare scenario. Imagine a member of ISIS saying, I'm going to deliberately infect myself with smallpox and just walks around. He will be the greatest weapon of mass destruction in all humanity. You'll be fine. We'll all be dead because none of us have the smallpox vaccination. Where does the word vaccination come from? Think of the Spanish cow word for cow, vaca. Vaccination is just getting the disease from the cow. So in other words, cows have another disease called cowpox. It's a relative of smallpox. Smallpox, we got it from cows. We got the deadlier cousin. Cows still get infected with the milder version cowpox. Basically, what is your vaccination? Yeah, you have the cowpox vaccination. You have a little bit of the virus there. It caused your skin that reaction, but now you're all set. None of us are. No, that's a biological weapon. Okay. But at the end of the day, don't worry, the greatest biological weapon, the greatest threat to us, does anyone know? The greatest biological weapon out there?
The zoonotic virus?
A zoonotic virus is the greatest threat. Let's hope they're not going to be weaponized. The zoonotic viruses are the greatest threat out there. Let's just hope that they're not going to be controlled by a state anytime soon. The greatest biological weapon is called botulinum toxin. Or short, Botox. Botox. It's the greatest biological weapon ever invented. I want you to think in terms of why it's addictive. Yeah, when you go into a clinic and get injected, you are being injected with a biological weapon. When a clinic supervises it, that's fine. When you buy it off the internet from China, you're buying literally a weapon. And more people die from bad Botox injections than from any of the other biological weapons. Our vanity ends up killing us a lot more than an actual terrorist. Anyway, so if AI can help somebody make sarin, right? What does that mean for somebody trying to make not necessarily a nuclear weapon, but what's called a radiological dirty bomb? So what is a dirty bomb? Well, it's you collect enough radioactive material, slap on some conventional explosives, detonate it in a major urban center, and benefit from the chaos and fear that ensues from radiological contamination. That's where AI could help. Where to get the radiological material, how to make it, and just think about where we're living. I want you to think about it. We have Coronado Naval Station, we have Coronado Air Base, we have Miramar Air Base, we have Camp Pendleton, we have General Atomics, one of the greatest producer of drones, and Viasat, all in the same place. And we're close to a border where things get smuggled in. So think about that is we are in the perfect place for a perfect target for a radiological bomb. Okay. Now, you might say this is outlandish, but what about a Swedish man who tried to build a nuclear reactor in the kitchen? using spare parts he got at IKEA. Okay, I'm joking about IKEA. He got it off eBay though. Seriously. Where did he find all the materials he needed? eBay. Fortunately, the plot was caught. But again, imagine if he could ask ChatGPT or Siri about how to make a more efficient nuclear reactor. This was in 2011. The confluence of AI and nuclear weapons is inevitable. This is kind of the Pandora's box that has been unleashed. And really, this was the conclusion. I'm going to the conclusion because I rarely finish a lecture on time. Remember the Istanbul story. Rarely do I finish. So this, I said, today, they're going to get the conclusion. And then we'll go back 80 years ago. We're kind of working in reverse. Okay. Now, the confluence of AI and counterproliferation has already occurred. And not in the way you would think about the role AI plays in another kind of weapon, disinformation, propaganda wars. And let's look how. Let us look at how. And the thing is, if deepfakes can create this, could they create something that would lead to a war breaking out? It might be,
In the
you
shadow.
might say that's an over-exaggeration, but let's not forget, the Spanish-American War began due to what we could call a viral meme. When I say a viral meme, the meme blowing up in the port of Havana in a newspaper. You didn't have deep fakes to create it. You just had a creative artist draw Americans being flying in the air because the USS Maine exploded. That was enough to start the War of 1898. All right. Let's look at the following.
Of the armed conflict between Israel and Iran, another battle is raging online. Over the past 2 weeks, the information war has intensified, flooding the internet with misleading content. AI manipulated videos, deepfakes, and recycled footage from past conflicts. DW Fact Check investigated, and here are 3 recent examples you should know about. A 16 seconds video shows a bird's eye view of a city in ruins. A location stamp in Arabic reads Tel Aviv. This clip has gone viral, shared by the Iranian media outlet Tehran Times on X, calling it Doomsday in Tel Aviv, and reposted across TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. However, it is AI generated and the details prove it. Look at the cars that are merging together. Also, the poor quality as well as the unidentifiable objects on the rooftops are indicators. The shadows are inconsistent. On the left building, they angle differently than on the right. This video claims to show Israelis protesting against their country's war on Iran. The video has been shared on TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. But again, it's AI generated. And here are some hints. A flag suddenly appears out of nowhere. The crowd looks oddly artificial, and there is a watermark from Google's AI tool VO3. This video claims to show the US attack on an Iranian nuclear facility. However, a Google Lens search leads us to this content creator that posted the exact same video days before the US announced its involvement in the war. In the caption, the creator describes the footage as an AI-generated video. Again, there are clear signs in the video itself as well. There is no shockwave or reaction from the person filming, and the smoke rises far too slowly for a real explosion. These are just 3 of many examples flooding the internet since the beginning of the war. So how can you protect yourself from falling for AI-generated fakes? Here are 3 quick tips. Use reverse image search. Check the source. Look for visual glitches. AI often gets the details wrong. So be careful, look closely, and always check before you share.
So you're getting an idea whether it is a plagiarized intelligence report, whether it's plagiarized, well, technically it is plagiarized if it's AI produced. I mean, in a lot of ways. And The other conclusion I want you to think about is this. Another thing that has been weaponized is a byproduct of the nuclear fuel cycle production, the weaponization of what's called depleted uranium. Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the nuclear cycle. And it was demonstrated that if you put depleted uranium on a projectile, it could penetrate armor much more effectively than just your regular artillery. Okay. The consequences of this is another form of atomic warfare. It's slow. And what this would be called is necropolitics. What we mean by necropolitics is this, is when political decisions lead to death slowly over a long period of time. Politics is about usually, well, this. You deploy a weapon, the enemy is obliterated almost instantaneously. Depleted uranium is usually when they're deployed in warfare, the residue contaminates the environment. Okay. Iraq, for example, both 1991 and 2003 suffers from depleted uranium. What do you mean? Higher cancer rates, contamination of water supply. In this article I had written, looking at the contamination happening in Ukraine, because you have to understand both sides are using depleted uranium. The artillery shells that Ukraine desperately needs from the US, from the howitzers, this would have depleted uranium. What the Russians are using would have depleted uranium. So not only are they getting it from both sides, but another tragic outcome is, let's not forget, Chernobyl is on Ukrainian soil. Okay, so this is a country where I tragically predict rates of cancer. The war could end. It doesn't mean that people won't start dying from exposure to depleted uranium contaminating the soil. Anyway. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at this meme, have a good laugh. Modern life sucks so much, I wish I lived in the past. And the whole reason I show this is an actual depiction of warfare, okay? What makes it pre-modern opposed to modern is this. There's only so many guys this person could skewer with his spear, okay? There's only so many butt kebabs he can make. Hey, Emily, can you get my picture? Post it on Instagram. Yeah. Okay. There's only so many butt kebabs this guy can make. This is not a weapon of mass destruction. All right. What happened 80 years ago? We unleashed a new weapon of mass destruction, right? But it had to be invented and innovated. And this is what we're going to look at. And we're going to do so by my students from Madrid, a blast from the past. We come back to Orwell, George Orwell. Otherwise known as Eric Arthur Blair, who was we could say a veteran. He was a veteran of the Spanish Civil War. This is the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939 was a rehearsal from World War II. For all intents and purposes, I call it a part of World War II. I don't make that distinction. Nevertheless, Orwell, having seen combat, I would argue became a good analyst of warfare. Okay. Orwell would have witnessed World War II, and so does his fellow Brit working for naval intelligence. This guy's name, wearing a proper uniform, is Ian Fleming, the author of the 007 series. Okay. Now, I want you to think of how warfare informed both of these British writers, novelists, for all intents and purposes. Ian Fleming worked for naval intelligence, the beginning of an organization today known as Five Eyes. Don't get them mixed up with Five Guys. That's a good fast food joint. Five Eyes, on the other hand, is the intelligence sharing arrangement between the US and the UK that was born out of World War II, includes Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Naval intelligence is one of the oldest forms of intelligence in the modern era. It's born out of naval warfare. Naval intelligence was always needed for the weather. I want you to think, D-Day. Why June 6th? 1944, the weather. There was an opening in the weather that allowed one of the largest amphibious assaults in history to occur. Naval intelligence is the first form of intelligence you always have. When the US was formed, its earliest intelligence agency was for naval intelligence. Okay. Nevertheless, what did Orwell witness in Spain? Was the following. Here is an tragic innovation. The plane had to be invented. The innovation is this. This is a plane for transporting passengers. The innovation is rigging it to have bomb bay doors and doing something unheard of. You see, in World War I, it was not uncommon for a pilot to throw grenades over a civilian center. It doesn't do much damage, right? This is something entirely different. Now, I want you to think here. What has to occur? Look at the innovations. First of all, taking a fuel called petroleum, replacing the coal with petroleum, something so light you could put it in the wings of a plane. First, the petroleum innovation. Second, being able to carry what was supposed to be passengers over a mass distance, now you're carrying bombs of mass destruction over a mass distance. Now, the key is the following. Who are you targeting? The masses. And that's what Guernica is looking at. The innovation, looking up in the air, is the shock of the innovation of death coming from the sky. This is the year 1937. And the Spaniards in Guernica could have never imagined death coming from the sky. Now, who would have guessed from 1937 the following? Well, let's go now. It's not only 80 years of the atomic bomb. Let's not forget, it's also 80 years of the United Nations. Literally, as we speak, the UN General Assembly is meeting, okay, with its future uncertain because the main funder of the UN is the United States. Usually when you give a speech at the UN General Assembly, the tradition is you field questions in front of a simulacrum of Guernica. The original Guernica now is in Spain. This is a simulacrum of Guernica because the UN mission was this. The first multilateral institution known as the League of Nations failed to stop Guernica. The revised version will not. So sure enough, this guy in front of Guernica is fielding questions. Colin Powell, when he gave his presentation at the UN General Assembly, did not field questions in front of the Guernica simulacrum because for Guernicas were going to be repeated over the skies of Iraq. Okay. And today, this is where the original Guernica is in the Reina Sofia Museum. This is me telling one of my students, taking a screenshot of my student's image of the original Guernica. The same month in which Guernica was bombed, so too was the Shanghai train station. We don't know the sex of this child. The child is burnt beyond recognition. His or her parents are dead. And who would have guessed, just as this child witnessed death from above in China, so too, and again, think of just the time span. It's only 1945, about 8 years, where Japanese children will look in the sky and see the sun being recreated above their city of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the innovation. So here we are. Now, I want you to think, is this a disruptive innovation? The way it was delivered? Well, let me put it this way. It took 19 hours for the B-29 to conduct this mission. First, I had to take off, and there wasn't any certainty it would be able to take off because the atomic bomb was so heavy. I wasn't sure the plane had to be stripped. In 19 hours, it could have easily been shot down. The only reason the Japanese never paid attention to it is what they really worried about were many bombers in formation. That's where the damage is done. Not only could it be shot down, one engineer had to go into the bomb bay doors and actually arm the atomic weapon. And there was no guarantee it wouldn't have exploded in midair. It was armed, and imagine if you would know how freezing it is in the plane's bomb bay. Okay, you can imagine how hard it was. And then it goes off, and the plane, has to get out of the damage, though. I wouldn't say that's disruption on a massive scale. It's not innovation per se, it's still an invention. Okay. Same with the V2. The disruptive innovation is when you're going to combine this with this. The V2 rocket, launched around 1944 for the first time, is the first human-made object to enter what we call outer space. By definition, about let's say 100 kilometers up in the air, we consider that out of space. It wasn't going into orbit, it was suborbital. It can go into orbit because this whole idea is by being suborbital, gravity will take it from the shores of Northern Europe to ideally London. Okay. And when gravity is bringing it down, this is a ballistic missile, okay? You cannot shoot down a ballistic missile. No Spitfire can shoot down something going this fast. It's unstoppable. Werner von Braun was a German scientist who helped create this missile. And then later, Werner von Braun would have another employer. Does anyone know who would later hire Werner von Braun? NASA, very good. NASA would. And basically the same technology that put the V2 into space, his work would take, basically propel Saturn V to the moon. And here we are to this day. The great innovation would be this. Can you innovate to make a nuclear weapon fit into what we call a rocket? And that's it. Basically, a rocket and missile, the words are interchangeable. And sure enough, I mean, it's amazing. The V2 is what was the first weaponized rocket, we could say. Okay. And you have to understand, that's the Saturn V. This was the Soviet design that failed, okay? But the point is this, the whole point of this, the technology is interchangeable. So you have to understand the entire space race was a cover for the nuclear missile race. You do it in the name of science, but both the Americans and Soviets know whatever you could put into space could also come back to Earth. Sputnik was so fearful because if you could put a small ball like that into space, what's stopping the Soviets from putting a nuclear weapon that small into space? You just have to innovate it. And so sure enough, let's look at the innovation. The first innovation is separating these little birds and havoc ensues, okay? That's what had to be invented. I want you to think now of the images we're going to look at here. And it says a lot. I mean, I wonder where did the word Trinity come from? Was Oppenheimer paying attention to the Trinity of the electron, proton, and neutron? But nevertheless, it's imbued with religious meaning. And this is what happened in July. So we're almost 80 years ago. It was put in the ground, and look at this. An explosion goes off. 100 meters. Here comes the fireball. It's not even a second. It's 0.006 seconds. Let's just keep on looking at the evolution. 0.016 seconds. 0.025 seconds. 0.062 seconds. Okay. And then they had to get a different camera. This is now just at 2 seconds. 6 seconds. You can see the original 100 meters. 9 seconds to capture this. 10 seconds. 30 seconds, the familiar mushroom cloud. And here's an analysis of what's going on. And of course, you just took that and dropped it over the skies of Hiroshima. Instead of putting it on the ground, the weapon detonated about 300 meters above Hiroshima. And this is the damage that ensued. And sure enough, it took a person named Ishiro Honda went to Hiroshima. And from there, he got the inspiration for the Godzilla franchise. And think, what is the original Godzilla? It's a lizard that witnesses an atomic testing that mutates. And what does Godzilla attack in the original series? Japan, you see. It's a metaphor for the atomic bomb. And which city is this? That's Hiroshima. Which city is this? Nagasaki? Okay, good. And it's a trick question that I'm setting you up for. It's actually Dresden. Look at the craters. You see, you could still obliterate a city off the face of the earth, but what's the difference? It took much longer. About a night, 100 bombers that could be shot down. You see, the intensity of the destruction is what changed. You're doing something in the split second that took with a single bomber, what it took a whole night to do in the case of Dresden. Now, here we come back to Orwell. And this is the legacy of Orwell, was this essay he wrote. Orwell is writing an essay in which he is analyzing military history through the lens of innovation, saying history is a history of weapons. Gunpowder, the great innovation of gunpowder, weaponizing gunpowder, led to the overthrow of the knight on shining armor, thus breaking down feudalism. The musket and rifle gave any person the ability to wage war, such as a militiaman in Virginia or a National Guardsman in France, bringing about the republics in both states, okay? Now, what will the atomic bomb bring? Not democracy, not the end of feudalism, but a peace that is no peace, or what he calls a Cold War. 1945, he's ushered in the Cold War. This is who we owe it to. We owe it to Orwell. And what did he predict? That only 3 to 4 countries will have a nuclear monopoly. But what he predicted is what we call nuclear proliferation today. If the US is going to get it, due to this thing, he didn't articulate this, but it's the whole basis of IR, due to the security dilemma. Of course, the Soviets are going to need to have it. And sure enough, 4 years later, they did. Okay. And I want you to think of how Orwell got the Cold War right. Think of 1984. Look at Britain, otherwise Airstrip 1 and the Cold War, the alliance there, the Eurasian alliance, the East Asian alliance, and how the alliances are constantly shifting. Think of the First World, Second World, Third World. Think of that and the actual map of the Cold War. Okay. Yeah, Orwell got the Cold War in 1984. Carl Sagan, a Ukrainian American, okay, not only writes about nuclear proliferation, he gives us the term nuclear winter. And basically, where are we now? What has been unleashed? Humanity has now the power to destroy all life on Earth almost instantaneously. You see, the nuclear weapons will probably we have enough nuclear weapons now to destroy all life on Earth. Any survivors will be killed by what Sagan said is the nuclear winter. So much debris in the air that nothing will survive the fallout. So, okay, let's look at this. And for those of you who went to Turkey with me, you know what this is. All of you maybe had a piece of an atomic bomb. Have a good joke. But see, this is not the innovation. This is the invention. These were all the inventions. Big, bulky bombs. Very hard to produce on a massive scale. I would say this, what you're seeing now in the next video, what was produced on the eve of the Korean War. This is the innovation. So let's look.
Shot 10, 25 May, proof tested another delivery system, the Army's 280 millimeter gun. When this shot was added to the program, some additional effects tests were scheduled to observe results of the low burst height, approximately 520 feet above ground.
How many seconds are going to ensue?
Since no gun type assembly had been detonated since the Hiroshima bomb, the weapons development scientists had on this shot their first opportunity to study the nucleonic behavior and fireball configuration of such a device. Yield 15 kilotons. Unlike the situation with an implosion weapon, the scientists were here able to observe fireball growth from a body of fissionable material whose exact shape and dimensions at the moment of detonation were known.
All right. Basically saying this is a mini A-bomb. And how long? Remember 19 minutes, that big bulky bomb in 1945? 5 years later, you see how quick it is, how small it is. You saw how big the shell was, and you saw how long it took to deploy. Okay, less than a minute. That's innovation. Now just take that and put it in a warhead of the growing space program. And then you have the disruptive innovation, I would argue, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. So many, okay, you could destroy life on Earth multiple times over. No, of course, this is the logic.
This is the
See what the Soviets responded with. Let's look at
single most powerful device ever constructed. Known as the Tsar bomber, this Soviet-designed nuclear weapon had a destructive power 10 times the combined force of all conventional explosives used in World War II, and was 3,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Weighing 27 metric tons, the Tsar bomber was so heavy it needed a specially modified plane to carry it to the release site. And it was on the 30th of October, 1961, that the bomb was dropped from an altitude of 6.5 miles above a remote island in the Arctic Ocean. Because the device was so absurdly powerful, a parachute was deployed to slow its descent and allow the plane's crew time to escape from the blast. When the bomb was detonated, it released an energy yield equivalent to 50 million tons of TNT and created a gigantic fireball that was visible from 500 miles away. The bomb completely destroyed everything within a 22-mile radius and damaged windows in Norway and Finland some thousands of miles away. Let's hope that such a ridiculously devastating event will never again take place.
Look at that. Let's hope such an event never will take place. Yet then over 12 days over the summer, what was the question that was most repeated? Is this the beginning of World War III? Are we witnessing a nuclear war? Oops. You just want to get what happened there, you know? Yeah, that's Hiroshima. And that was the Tsar bomber. This is Mount Everest, by the way. Oops. That's Mount Everest. Okay. That's the Tsar bomber. Okay. Sure enough. Okay, we don't need to see that. At the end of the day, well, I was making kind of a facetious joke about that spear. I want you to look at this machete. The greatest weapons of mass destruction at the end of the day happen to be, okay, Hutus talking about Tutsis as cockroaches in cheaply produced magazines that could easily be reproduced, a radio station, and machetes that could be produced in China for 10 cents a piece. At the end of the day, for all our fixation on atomic weapons, let's not forget. Combine that, magazines, disinformation, a radio station, and machetes in the hand of Hutu militias, ended up killing 1.1 million people out of a population of 7.3 million people in Rwanda, okay, over the span of 100 days. So like I said, even though the atomic bomb was horrific for its instantaneous death, let's not forget the genocides that happened after the invention of the atomic bomb. Okay. And if we look at this part of the world, let us not forget now. I like this map. I don't like maps of the Middle East. I like maps like this because they show this a dynamic. Here we have India and Pakistan, which in May 2025 almost went to war. Both are nuclear powers. Let's not forget, India, Pakistan, and China come together, and China, of course, is a nuclear power. And you probably forgot, in 2020, China and India were about to go to war over this piece of territory known as Ladakh. Of course, Russia has nuclear weapons. And then let's not forget, Israel practices a policy of what's called nuclear opacity. We won't sign the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. We want the world to guess about how many nuclear powers nuclear weapons we have. What's the consequence of such a policy? Well, let me go to now another video. Oopsie. Okay. And I want you to think. Okay, I kind of gave it away, but let's watch the following. When was this video created? And for those of you who won't be able to guess, this is about a conflict over a narrow strip of land. Let's just call it, for the sake of convenience, the Holy Land. I think that's the safest answer. And let's watch how many people have fought for this piece of land.
This land is mine. God gave this land to me. This brave and ancient land to me. And when the sun reveals her hidden flame, and I see a land where children can run free. So take my hand, this land with me, and walk this lonely road. Just enough when you are with the heart, you know I can go. Just enough when you are start with the help of God. Make this land our own.
Okay, now if any of you have military experiences, you know that the Israeli military doesn't use Kalashnikovs. Okay, let's give her credit. Nina Paley is a Jewish American animator who made this video. But you all recognize this. You all recognize the mushroom clouds by now, and that says a lot. The fact that this scenario has been ingrained in our imagination. Basically, she's saying nuclear Armageddon is the way the conflict for the Holy Land will end. Now, when do you think she produced this video? 70s? Oh, the music sounds like the music is from the 70s and 80s. It's Daniel Boone. But the video itself, the animation, yeah. Before the war, so you would think before October 7th. Yeah, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, basically in 2014, she says, in other words, that's how long Hamas and the Israelis have been fighting, you see, more than 10 years ago. And basically she said, where is this conflict going to lead? Nuclear Armageddon. Would you say 10 years ago she's exaggerating? And again, think of the worst case scenarios we were imagining during the 12-Day War. That's where we are. Now, combine that with, let's go back to Ian Fleming. Why did I talk about him? Orwell got the Cold War right. Ian Fleming got the post 9/11 world right. Think of the villains in Ian Fleming 007. It's never the Soviets. It's always super empowered individuals who could change the world. And I just want you to think after the Cold War, I want you to think of Bill Gates and his ability to respond to the Ebola epidemic faster than the World Health Organization. Think Elon Musk creating a better space program than NASA. And think of Osama bin Laden goading America to fight a war for 20 years and spending billions. Those are all characters out of any Bond novel. And so it's not hard to imagine that. Imagine a group like ISIS, if not deliberately spreading smallpox. You cannot retaliate against ISIS. The Islamic State no longer exists. Or a radiological bomb. And now you understand why the doomsday clock is 89 seconds to midnight. Any of these scenarios are still a possibility. And that's the future you have to look forward to. Okay, great, guys. So thanks for this lecture. It was good seeing you. Now, can you help us save the Earth? Yeah, that's your job. Thank you.
I know that Ibrahim has to run off to SCFU. He's giving a lecture there at 6.
On Afghanistan, another, cozy, nice little
But
cozy
I
conflict.
gotta thank you, because that's Afghanistan A to Z.
Afghanistan from Alexander to.
You've laid the foundation for so many of the conversations we're gonna have in the future. Mia might talk about biological weapons and